Hey everyone, today I'm taking a look at Polynesia, which is a 2 to 4 player board game designed by Peer Sylvester and published by Ludo Nova. This one takes about an hour to play and was published in 2020. Now, I don't normally blind buy games, but this was one of them based on this awesome looking box cover and the fact it is indeed designed by Peer Sylvester, who I think is a really solid designer, famous for games such as The King is Dead. I did think this was going to be more of a Euro-style game, but in fact it is much more in the abstract camp that takes place on this board here with all these different islands. And the idea is we are these Polynesian natives trying to relocate on these different islands before the volcano explodes. Now, the winner of the game is going to be the player with the most points at the end of the game, and you're going to achieve points by a number of things, such as being on these islands here with the turtles on, and fulfilling public objectives, like so. There are 3 different public objectives available every game, based into different decks here. So you've got like your 1 card, your 2 cards, and your 3 cards, and they'll all be doing different things. And then we'll talk about those in a bit. There is also some tiles that are divvied out randomly at the start of the game, or at least semi-randomly. And as you can see, this board is divided into these islands which have either resource tokens on, which come in the form of fish or these clams. And also some islands are kind of paired together in these archipelagos, which has this kind of line around the pair of islands like so. Every player has also got a player board that looks like this, where you have a bunch of your islanders in a kind of a growing order, starting from 2 points and going to 7 points. And the idea here as well is if you deploy more of your workers onto the board, the lowest available or the highest available spot that you've got left is going to, or got revealed, is going to score you that many points at the end of the game. So having more of your people down onto the board is going to be good. But at the same time, if your workers are still on these spots here with these orange outlines on, when that volcano explodes, they're going to come back onto your board and potentially lose you points, or at least not let you gain as many points as you would have. You start with a couple of resources like so. And let's have a quick look at the objectives. So as I said, these are quite varied in terms of you can do quite a lot of different setups, and they are based on different things you can do in the game. So for example, in this one kind of changes the game rules, saying that every time you build onto an archipelago or build a route that goes onto an archipelago for the first time, it's going to cost you double the amount of resources. So kind of a change of the rules there. This one here says that as soon as a player gets a mask symbol, which are these little tokens here like this, then you can choose a resource type and choose whether to take 2 of those resources or make all the other players lose 2 of those resources. So, that one's got a bit of take that in it. And the number 3 here I've set up with the player with the most ships on the map gains 3 points. And that's the end of the game bonus, or end of the game criteria there, which is dictated by this symbol here. So what you're actually going to do in the game is you're going to flow through this little time track here, which dictates phase from phase. And the game is going to end whenever the 6th volcano cube is going to be drawn from this bag here. So let's have a look at the main actions you can do. So the main actions you can do is explore, travel, populate, or fish. And I suppose they're all pretty simple in their own right. And the phase that you do these actions in is also really important, because as you can see from this track here, it goes from 3, 2, 1. Then you'll draw something from the volcano, and then one of your resources will be gone based on who's the first player, gets to decide that. And then you'll produce all the resources, and then the first player will change. So the importance of it being 3, 2, 1 is because this actually determines the strength of certain actions you can take. So for example, in the first action you can take, the explore action, to create a new route, which means placing one of these boats onto the board, is going to cost you a boat. You're going to have to spend a boat. And you're going to have to pay a number of resources, either these fish tokens or these clam tokens, equal to that round number. So for example, if it is that 3, then you're going to have to pay 3 resources in order to place your boat on any route on the board. And when you do, you'll spend those resources and you'll put one of those resources next to your boat to determine which you spent when you did that action. You can also choose to build on a route where somebody else already has built. So for example, like this, you might put one of these boats on here, like so, but then you'd have to spend 2 resources equal to the type that they've already spent, so you'd have to spend 2 clams in this example. Now I will say, in a 2-player game, that rule is not an option. You only get the first option of creating a new route rather than piggybacking on someone else's route. Another option you can take is the travel action, where again you'll spend you'll spend or get a number of movement points equal to the current round. So it's going to be more powerful in the earlier rounds where you get 3 actions, where you can move your workers from point to point. So for example, here, if I had 2 movement points, I can go 1 and move it from along this line here. And if I had a second one, I can follow a route that I control or another player's control, but the cost of that will be different. So let's say, for example, this setup was like this. I could actually choose, and let's say this boat wasn't here, and I was this purple player, I could choose to either travel down my route for free for another movement point, or if I was the pink player, I can still travel down another player's route, but I would have to drag them with me and pay one of the resources that they've already spent there. So that would cost me a clam, and again, I'd have to take him with me when I do so. The populate action is pretty simple, where you're going to be adding new workers onto the board, taking them from your player board, where you either put a worker onto an island where you already have one. So I could do this, for example, or I can place 3 workers onto the main island like so, which again is important because you don't want anyone on there for the earlier rounds or when the game ends, because if they are on there, then they're going to go back onto your player board. The final action is to fish, where you simply collect resources based on the current round. So again, if it's that 3 round, then you're going to get up to 3 resources. If there's 2, you're going to get 2, and if it's 1, you're going to get 1. So it has this weird kind of pacing where some actions are stronger based on the current round it's on, and some are weaker. So obviously, when you choose to explore, it's going to be more expensive in this round than in this round. But if you choose to travel, then it's going to be better if you do it here rather than worse. And again, if you want to collect resources, it's going to be more efficient if you do it here. But the reason you might not always want to do it in that order is because when you choose to travel onto some new regions, you're going to get the tokens for doing so. And these kind of do different things depending on the current setup of those cards, such as, I said, the masks in this particular scenario are going to either get you resources or make your opponents lose resources. These turtle ones here are going to give you points at the end of the game. And the ones like here, such as the fish or the clams, are going to give you a more income each round. And again, this one lets you deploy a boat anywhere on the board. Now, after those 3 phases are done and you've taken those main actions, choosing 1 per turn, you're going to go onto the volcano action, where you're going to draw a cube from this bag here, like so, if I can sort it out with one hand, like so. And there are 3 different colours of cubes in that bag. There are these red ones, there are black ones, and there are grey ones. Now the red ones are kind of a countdown mechanism where as soon as the 6th one is revealed, then the game is going to be over. The black ones basically can expedite the end of the game by, as soon as you reveal them, so I'll do this one, you actually end up drawing another 2 cubes from the bag, which can obviously speed things up. And the grey ones are basically just defunct and don't do anything, making the game take a bit longer. After you've done that, depending on who's the first player, they're going to choose one of the 2 resources, either the fish or the clams, in order to make all players discard all resources of that type. So as you can probably imagine, if another player has stockpiled a load of fish and you've got a load of clams, you're probably going to choose your opponent to lose all their fish. And after that, you go on to the production phase, where wherever you've got a worker, like so, you're going to generate resources. So, for example, here I would get 1 fish, 2 fish, 3 fish, and a clam. And that'll be my income for the next phase. And as soon as that's over, then the round is going to end, and you're going to change the first player to the next player in player order. And then you'll start again going through the motions. And as I said, as soon as that 6th cube is revealed, then the game is going to end. Now, obviously, in terms of decisions, you are obviously going for these objectives, trying to get these points, as many as you can, trying to get as many of your people onto the board and get them out of these initial starting regions, because you don't want them coming back. Additionally, you're trying to get them on these islands here with these turtles on, because although they're harder to get to, then they're going to give you more points at the end of the game, and so on. So there is a bit of variation from game to game, but the strategies are pretty simple, normally involving getting on these islands with the archipelagos or collecting these turtle symbols or masks and so on. And that's basically how the game plays. It's not rocket science, but as you probably imagine, it plays in a very abstract way. So let's take a look at some of these other objectives that you can set up. So let's have a look. Some of the number 1 cards are pretty simple. So for example, this one, you're going to get 1 point for each archipelago where their tribe is present on at least one of the islands. And if you're present on all of the sets of archipelagos, then you're going to get an additional 5 points at the end. There's ones here where you're going to get 2 points for each archipelago where their tribe is present on both islands. And you're going to get 10 points if you have all of them at the end of the game. So those two go pretty much hand in hand, but one's slightly easier than the other one. You've got ones like this where the first route that connects to an archipelago costs twice as much, which is what I explained during setup. And you've got this one here where the first player to get one of their tribe members onto an archipelago gains a point token. So you're kind of encouraged to race to these regions. The number 2s, let's just take a look at a few of them. So again, masks obtained. It works in the set collection in this scenario where 1 mask is going to get you -1 points, but the more you get, you're going to get potential for quite a few points. Each player gains as many points as the result of multiplying the number of masks they have obtained by the number of archipelagos where they're at. So again, there's all things based on masks and the number of archipelagos, basically. And some of the number 3 ones, let's have a look. All players carry out the resource phase at the end of the game, and then the player with the most fish gets 4 points. I think that's the same one, but with clams. And let's have a look at something a bit different here. So every time that a player explores an existing route, they gain 1 point token for each ship present on that route. So again, there's just slight different tweaks here to change the gameplay just a little bit. Now let's have a think about how I actually think about this game and my personal thoughts on it. So I will say abstract games aren't normally my cup of tea, so I'm not probably the best guy to give my opinion because it just isn't my forte. Now I can appreciate them, but generally it's not something I lean towards. So something I do like is this round kind of order here. So not only is it a countdown, but your rewards or cost of things deplete as the round goes on, and you can use that to your benefit. But sometimes you might even forsake reaping the benefits of, say, collecting a certain reward when you have got that 3 available because you want to particularly get to somewhere quicker than your opponent does because you want to get one of these tokens, which can naturally be really important. And then you can play efficiently by, if you explore a new route here, you only have to pay 1, but if you take the gain resources action, you're only going to gain 1. So I quite like that pacing here, where sometimes the actions are better or worse depending on where you take them. The idea of drawing the resource cubes from the bag I think it's quite a neat idea in terms of making the game last different amounts of times each time you play. Sometimes you can particularly get a fast game where you draw all these red cubes out quickly, and then sometimes it might be a longer affair. So I do like that, not perfect information about how long the game is going to go on, which can make you expedite doing things quicker than you normally might want to because you just don't know when that game's going to end. Now, something I really don't like at all is this action here where you can choose a resource and force your opponents to get rid of all of those resources. And I will say you have to do that yourself as well, so you've got to bear that in mind. But for me, it just feels a bit too take that-ish and a bit of an obvious choice because you're obviously going to choose what's going to benefit your opponents more. I'd rather have the resources being a bit tighter and everyone just have to manage them a bit better rather than just giving you loads of rewards and then just having to wipe them out each time. I quite like the idea here as well with the gaining the resources, because in the earlier rounds or as the game develops, you want to be on all these islands here because you're going to get more resources from turn to turn. But normally you get a lot of points for being on the archipelagos and they don't give you as many resources for doing so. So that's quite cool, and you have to kind of generate a little bit of an economy in order to get that constant income from round to round. So I do like that. Now let's have a talk about some of the player balance here. So I will say that I think the objectives are relatively well balanced. I think they're achievable, but it's pretty tight to do so, which is, it's just about right. And I do like the slight economy here of when you have to go to or use other players' routes, then you have to pay them to do so. I do like that back and forth, and that's an aspect of board game I like, is when you can establish something for yourself and then end up paying people for your investments, or people can pay you for previous investments. So that works really well here. Mechanically, it's boiled down into some pretty simple decisions. Just those 4 main actions you can take, and I suppose most of the actual decisions go into how you're going to use those simple actions in order to achieve the actual objectives. So that works okay as well. And time investment wise, the game takes probably about 45 minutes to an hour, and I wouldn't say it outstayed its welcome because, sometimes you're going to draw these red cubes out quicker. Sometimes it's going to be a bit slower because you end up drawing all the grey ones. But it certainly doesn't outstay its welcome, and it's not one of those games that drag out. The uptime as well, snappy turns. These actions are simple in their own right. There's not really much scope for bogging down, your thoughts and racking your brain over all the variables. You're going to know what you're going to want to do. Basically get on those archipelagos and get these tokens. Replayability is not the best in my opinion. Although there's a lot of options here in terms of the different objectives you can take and set up with, they're all very similar, and the game feels very similar from time to time. So I can't speak too highly in terms of replayability. It's not a game I'm going to want to go back to again. And in terms of interaction as well, I do like the way that, as I said, these routes work. When you establish a route, then you can choose to pay people to use those routes, and on top of that as well, if you're sharing an island and then you end up moving that route, you're going to have to drag someone with you to take them with you, which can benefit them or can even hinder them, to be honest. So that's another quite interesting wrinkle there. But ultimately, I found that although this game scales from 2 to 4 players, and there is a double-sided board to indicate that, I found that in the lower player counts, particularly our 2-player, it's way too open. Somebody can really focus on this side of the board when someone can focus on the other. Yes, you have to fight for these archipelagos, but there's so many routes here, and that you can take and go around things that you can often ignore what other players are doing and just find your own route there and have enough time to do it. So interaction for me wasn't the best. I do like the kind of time pressure of having to be off these islands early, or risk coming back to your player board. So always having an empty player board is going to be beneficial. And if you don't really make much of an effort there, you can end up actually doing worse than you started with, which is, I think, going to be a rare occurrence, but it can happen. The theme, it's an abstract game, but the designer does explain that this isn't something he's picked randomly as a skin. I think he's somewhat interested in this theme and things, but ultimately it's a skin. It's very dry, but it works absolutely fine. With the boats and the kind of residents here just trying to flee and find new homes. That's absolutely fine. And setup and teardown time as well is no issue. Just kind of randomly set up these tiles by putting them face down on certain spots and revealing them, and going from there. And choosing the different setups here as well is very simple because there's just 3 different categories, which just takes 2 seconds to sort out. Progression, while I do like the fact that more routes are developed throughout the game, now obviously the game isn't going to end looking like this, I've just used this as an example. A lot of these spots are going to be filled. I still harken back to the fact it being a bit too open for me, being just a few too many routes. I think I would have been a lot more cutthroat and a bit more interactive, inevitably interactive, if just a few of these routes were taken out. The scalability, again, it's going to be better at that 3 or 4 player count, but I tend to like games being a bit snappier at lower player counts. But if you want to play a game at 2 players, I wouldn't really recommend this. I would have preferred to have seen an effort to be made to make the game tighter or a lot more restrictive than it is. And comparison-wise, I'm not an expert in abstract games. There are a few I like, and this one I can certainly see a fresh lick of paint here. I've not really played any abstract game quite like this, so I do appreciate the fresh ideas here and the way it plays. But again, another abstract game which is not something I'm terribly knowledgeable about. So overall, I would say that I can objectively appreciate the design here, but ultimately I didn't get much fun out of it. As I reiterate, I tend not to get a lot of fun out of abstract games anyway. I find them a bit too transparent in terms of everything being so open. I like a little bit of not randomness, but a little bit of spice being added into games where I find abstracts a bit too head-to-head, a bit too dry. But I do appreciate the different vibe it's gone for here, especially with the route sharing. Again, I like the pacing here. I like the kind of not random, but undetermined amount of rounds it's going to take. It could have been a bit more exciting, I think, but it does okay of a job at this. I really hate that element of having to choose a resource and choose an opponent to get, or choose everyone else to get rid of all those resources, meaning that you're going to always kind of take a balanced approach. But yeah, ultimately, another abstract game that didn't really blow me away. I felt a little bit underwhelmed by it, and at the end of the day, I didn't get a lot of fun out of it, which is obviously what I want with board games. Whereas, you know, every Euro game I can kind of sit back and enjoy, whereas abstract games I feel I just don't get any fun out of them. So unfortunately, I can't really recommend Polynesia, but don't take that as a slight on the game design or anything like that. It's more of a personal preference. I hope this has been somewhat useful to you. If it has, please hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.